very good evening and welcome this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mangushampagi, and with me tonight we have a panel of journalists discussing the major events that dominated news headlines during the week. I have with me Mr. Yusuf Serunkuma. Yusuf is a columnist at The Observer and is an academic. Yusuf, very nice to have you.
Thank you for having me, Charles.
We also have with us Agatha Atweire. Agatha Atweire is a journalist and a lawyer. She's an independent writer at the moment. Very nice to have you.
Thanks for having me, Charles.
Dictor Asimwe is a senior writer with the East African. Dictor, very nice to have you.
Thank you.
To begin with, congratulations to His Royal Majesty the King of Toro and the Chabazinga of Busoga, both celebrated anniversaries in Toro. 24 years since King Oyo took the reins of that kingdom, and a grand celebration at Karuzika Palace on Thursday. Then that was followed closely with Busoga, which had its celebrations, I think sixth anniversary celebrations for the Chabazinga, which took place on Friday. So congratulations to the peoples of those two areas, both in Toro and in Busoga, and of course to the country. President Yoweri Museveni on 9th penned another missive, memo, letter, I don't know what it is, to the Ugandans and to especially Abazukulu about insecurity, particularly the murders of Maria Nagirinya and Chitayimbwa, and the murder of Joshua Rushejera and Merina Tumukunde. We will be discussing the contents of the president's letter in the context of the growing insecurity. But we'll tie that together closely with the sanctions slapped on former Inspector General of Police, Kale Kaihura, who was partly booted out of the police leadership for his failure to contain the insecurity as it was growing. And of course, yes, even issues to do with alleged kidnap of suspected dissidents, Rwandan dissidents, and deporting them also contributed to part of the insecurity that partly cost him his job in 2017. We'll be discussing a bit of that. President Yoweri Museveni and Uganda and Kenya, represented by President Yoweri Museveni and President Uhuru Kenyatta, signing an MOU on security issues along the common border between Uganda and Kenya, particular areas of Karamoja on the Ugandan side and Turkana on the Kenyan side. Now, I know Dictor was in Moroto for that signing. I was in Moroto yesterday. I was in Fort Portal on Thursday and then Moroto yesterday. So there are many things to discuss about the development trajectory for that area, especially the peace dividend on the Ugandan side of the border. Whether that is reflected on the Kenyan side of the border and what it can bring for that enclave is what we'll be discussing. And we'll also discuss, if time allowing us really, the National Budget Conference and the promises and the assessment, the self-assessment that Matia Kasaija is giving about the performance of the economy, and as we prepare for an elections budget next year. Let me start with Dictor. You read the president's letter. Was that a letter? Was it a memo? Was it, what would you call it? And we were just before we started the show asking how many of these has he written? What do they mean? Or how many times has he responded to the question of security? What does this mean?
I don't know. The president used to be someone who deflects blame on so many things, but from the most recent letter, it seems he has decided to say we are being successful, even when it's very hard to see the results that he's talking about. In the case of Nagirinya, for example, he says we've arrested the culprits. We don't know whether that's true. I, for one, have problems with the claim that those must be the people who committed the crime even before they have been taken through the courts. And especially considering that you're arguing that someone who has paid 1.5, a group of people has paid 1.5 million shillings to commit a crime, which in my interpretation means they are desperate for money. But somehow they drive a car from Mukono and throw it in Natete when they had time to maybe disassemble it, say it as spare parts, make more money. Because if you're saying these guys are desperate, they're in it for the money, surely they know the value of a car. But then now we know that they didn't take the car. I fail to understand that. So the president has addressed the country several times, but all we see, I think, is that it's failed to work. His addresses, his the man who knows how to deal with security, I think he's losing that stature. And the letters are sort of a cover-up. The letters and addresses to the nation.
Agatha, many people watching us, and especially the older people, will be trying to do a stock taking, reflecting back on history, on the days of insecurity. The difference is, when it happened before Museveni and the NRM took power, there was no explanation. But there were comments the presidents used to talk about bandits who are in the bush and other people destabilizing the country. Some people I have heard since this letter came out, and it's been debated extensively on social media and other media platforms, that people are saying, wait a minute, how did you arrive at this? Can you explain it away? If security was your tough, was your biggest selling point, and especially people looking at and saying, before writing this letter, he'd addressed the nation on the killing of Abiriga. Yes. He had written after the killing of Muhammad Chirumira. He had written after, or written or addressed the nation after that.
Sometimes he's done both.
Yes. Can you explain those away? And yes, and he chooses, he picks choice words. These are pigs. We shall deal with them.
Yes. I think we have said it before that our problem, I have heard many people say that longevity in power of presidents is not necessarily a bad thing. But we have said that the problem comes when you are using resources to ensure you stay in power at the expense of other things. We have seen that the journey of the police to where it is now was because police concentrated more for a long time on political intelligence than on crime. On keeping Museveni in power, we have all seen when Besigye would be walk to work or a protest, how many police officers are deployed for just that purpose. We have seen when people want to just assemble ever since the Public Order Management Act came up, how many police officers would be there to make sure people don't assemble, which is their constitutional right. So I think Museveni lost that, what you call his staff on security, when he started to concentrate more on how do I stay in power, how do I fight people that are threatening my power, because that means you're taking away resources from the priorities, and resources in terms of human resources, in terms of finances, in terms of everything, to putting it in protecting yourself and your staff now. Although the police has been getting, especially during Kaihura's time, well, its budget really drastically increased, it was never for protecting people and their property, because we saw tanks, tear gas tanks coming in, and all that was for, mostly they would come in during like an election cycle, yes. So I think that's my feeling, that that's what happened, that we got our priorities wrong and decided to concentrate more on this and that.
Can the president explain that away in his letters?
When he writes letters, the president never explains anything in his letters. This time, at least he blamed the police for failing to arrest Najinya, but he always says this swines, I mean, yeah, for arresting them or for preventing them from killing her. But in his letters, Museveni always says, oh, we are on top of it, these are swines, we will catch them, they live close. He has said that for the last how many years? This killing started in 2012 then. The other day he said, the reason Kagezi died and Kawesi and Major Chigundu was because there were still loopholes that were addressed. But can we even count how many people, how many more have died after that? The security of the budget of the security was the second highest this financial year, at about 9.5% of the entire budget. But it's not reflected in the work they have done. We have not seen any improvement. It just gets worse. So I don't know what Museveni thinks he achieves by penning them. I don't know if there are people out there who believe, or even really, I think I just read them because I will come here and you ask me a question about it. I would never read them or watch you.
That's interesting.
It's been his style of responding to public concerns, either by writing letters or addressing the media, the nation through the media directly.
Actually, the day Chirumira was murdered, he addressed. He had already planned it to address the previous murders, and that day Chirumira was murdered.
Yes.
And he still had the guts to sit there and tell people these are swines. I don't know, when you're listening to him or reading it, you just get angrier. It makes you more mad than the actual killings. That someone is still in denial and thinking, I am on top of it, I have put in place things, the cameras, the what, but really all we are seeing is more and more people in this country being murdered. And like Victor said, I cannot believe that, I cannot start jubilating that they have arrested Nigerian killers. It's been so many times when they have arrested people and charges are dropped.
The problem, I'll tell you something, that there are about 6, close to 9 people, no, 6 people arrested over Nigeria's killing. I have good information, I have it on good authority, that the other arms of security, ISO CMI, have told the police to release the first 3 they arrested because they arrested the wrong people. And they think they arrested the right people now. And
You think?
No, from my sources, they say they think they narrowed down on the, as close as possible to the actual suspects, but that the police in its earlier sweep had picked up the wrong people and recommended to the police that please release those people, they're suffering for nothing. You'll find the same thing, because also during the week we had this very ugly incident of the rearrest of the suspects in the Kawesi murder.
Yes.
And
Court premises.
Yeah, at court premises, in a manner that people are saying, wait a minute, have we come full circle? But before we go to that, Yusuf, I need to put this question to you. Is it a coincidence? The United States has sanctioned Kale Kaihura. We'll discuss that in better detail shortly after now. But Kaihura takes over the Uganda police in November 2015. No, 2005. His very first experience is to deal with a demonstration at Makerere University. Actually, a tear gas canister is lobbed towards where he was, and he is a victim of tear gas right on the first day of his job, the very first day he was out in operations. And you see a bump that Agatha is talking about in the police budget. 2009, it's 10 years, by the way, this month, since the 2009 Kayunga riots. You have officially about 29 people acknowledged killed in containing that demonstration. Unofficially, Human Rights Watch says in the investigations that about 43 people were killed on that day, the 29th of, was it 29th of September? Something like that? Yes. No, 9th?
11?
Yeah, about 11th September. Yeah, about 11th September. They estimate about 43 people were killed.
It was actually 12th September.
12th September, yes. And that 12th September, some of those killed included a baby who was killed inside the sitting room of his father's house in Kamocha. Included a woman who was on her veranda running away in Nakolabi. Included a man who had run and hid in his house, who were killed by stray bullets, if you want to put it that way. But there are also people who were killed on the streets, many people. Then shortly after that, you have walk to work. And walk to work becomes the bigger political discussion, the role of the opposition, and how it gets contained. 2009, you have the passing of the Public Order Management Act and the investment in police and containment of public order that Agatha was talking about. But also, 2012, you have the beginning, at least in our own definition now, of this string of murders, of Muslim clerics, of mobile money agents, of there was Kateyimbwa also around that time, and it's been mutating up to this day. How do you explain this away if you are President Museveni and you're in charge of the country's security?
You write a letter.
You address the
you ask all the TVs in the country to tune into either Nakasero or Entebbe and listen to you speak. You demand.
You order. UCC writes and tells everybody, do nothing but tune into this.
If you don't, you lose your license.
I wanted to pick something about the letters that the president is writing to us. I don't know what happened to the president's sense of humor. You know, listen to the president back in the days. His speeches were filled with figures of speech. He was very humorous and witty. You know, things like
you can't be humorous and witty when you're writing about death.
Well, let me drop this. It was really fascinating to listen to the president then. that he would say things like, if a stick of grass fell off a roof, it won't start leaking. If one spoke in a bicycle wheel, it jumped out, it won't stop.
One piece of
You remember
grass,
the end that if you say buffalo and you say, I wish it broke its leg, that would not necessarily break the leg of the buffalo. You know, the president then was kind of witty in addressing the nation. Nowadays, it's insults and anger. I mean, stupid, swine, pigs, an eye for an eye. I don't know if we should blame the president's speechwriters. All the times I've caught up with him. That
well, for the first time, they gave his handwritten communication. He wrote. I think the purpose of sharing both the typed text and the handwritten text was to tell you this is the president writing himself. These are his words. This is his communication. So
as a student of letters, I should tell you that when you lace a speech with insults, you compromise its seriousness. You downplay its seriousness. Now, in a moment of calamity, in a moment of grief, death has faced this country at a magnitude that has caught the public attention, you ought to be more serious than opt to insult and denigrate. Because insults in themselves compromise the seriousness of the moment, which is expected of the president. But something was happening in that speech. I found it really fascinating reading it closely. Among other things, like, we've bundled everything together. So we have, like violence, gun violence in this country is happening like at 3 levels. There's robbery, like crime, where people are stealing using guns. There's terrorism in this country. You know, 2010 and other forms of terrorism that have happened in this country are also part of gun violence. But then there's also political assassinations, right? When you see Afande Kawesi, you can't call them political assassinations, but people who have a public profile as political players. Security people, serious security individuals, Chirumira, Kawesi, Chigundu, and then the scholars, the Muslim scholars, then a judge of the High Court. Those could be categorized as political assassinations. Now, what happened is that we've banded all of them together.
You mean the prosecutor, not the judge?
No, the
prosecutor, John Kagezi.
Yeah. So we've bundled all these different forms of gun violence together. So you respond to robbery the same way you respond to the murder of Afande Chirimira. I think there's a problem. Now, the interventions that President mentioned in this speech, which I think are scaling our budgets high, although I've actually started thinking that somebody is cashing in on these interventions.
Of course.
Like on the cameras.
It was a cash cow. It had nothing to do with...
But something happened. You know, when you look at them, a security expert will tell you that these interventions actually respond to petty crime. Like the people who murdered, who assassinated Afande Kawesi, surely are not afraid of being caught on camera doing it. All right? Or they have the sophistication.
Or Joshua.
They have the sophistication to do what they do without being caught on camera.
You'd want to say that, Yusuf, about the killing and the investigation into the murder of Kawesi, because there they have been able to track, but the case is not making any progress. And we saw, because it's brought to life once again. Kawesi was killed in March 2017.
Yes.
It's brought back to life because court releases the suspects you've been holding for that long, and they get released. You failed to try them. You released composites to say this is what they look like, but those composites were left out of town, and
they
people saying,
like
wait a minute, if somebody as high as that level can be assassinated in the police should have a self-interest to establish who committed this murder. When you add Kirumira, when you have Kirumira added to that, the audacity of the killers, the ability to melt away in thin air, you actually can't rule out the fact that you can't rule out the fact that these guys are standing. When I went to the crime scene of the Kawesi murder shortly after I had been killed, you wouldn't fail to fathom the idea that actually the guy you're standing next to you either planned it or actually executed it, and he's watching what is going on.
And what you've just said is that the quality, the training these guys seem to have gone through, is not the type of training of someone to whom you respond by making sure that CCTV cameras across the country, you're banning hooded border riders, you're having reflector helmets, you are trackable motorcycles. These interventions really far fall short of the needed interventions required.
What are the needed interventions?
But
what would you say?
I
know you're not a security
security
expert.
expert, but I think diagnosing the problem is part A of the interventions. But we also need to be aware. You know, our lead theorist on security is the president. All right, I don't know how much our president is trained in security, but I think the intervention we've seen so far are not really up to the game, because as it's happened like 5 years ago, 2012, when the murders started, right? They've only scaled. I actually wrote an opinion back in I think 2014, that waiting for the next murders, all right? And I can tell you, I feel like reproducing this piece every time a next murder happens, because from my assessment, I think we're at the beginning. Like, you know, if you saw the way they took out Joan Kagezi, what's her name?
John Kagezi.
Not Joan Kagezi, Susan Magara. The murder of Susan Magara, I told you last time I was here, it was very phenomenal in the sense that the quality was really very, very up there. And knowing that even the victim was in a way related or known to the first family, that's scary. The most recent murder along the Entebbe Road, this is somebody who the president even confronted is a close relative.
Yes.
Now, if these are murderers who are really interested, who are murdering people who are close to the first family, that is so my reason to worry. And the other reason to worry is that these are not interested in the material benefits. They're not interested in money, neither are they interested in the vehicles or phones. They leave all those things, they just murder. So if we're thinking...
I think the thing that's missing out is what doesn't get played out in the media that much is the killings for financial benefit. The crime that is crime of stealing.
Yeah.
Those don't get as much mention,
Yeah.
but they're happening.
They are.
You see, in this discussion, and even in the media reporting, on the day Joshua Rushejera and Merina were murdered, there was a murder in the Antonde. We did talk about it briefly here. There was a murder in the Antonde that killed 3 people.
They didn't take anything.
But they also didn't take anything from there. But you want to know, why is it a land dispute? Do they want to wipe out the family so that they can... what is it that's causing this killing?
But you see,
Yes.
and it's sort of a mistake for us to just focus on the murders, because across the country, people are terrorized. In Uganda, people live with their animals in their house, which doctors tell you is wrong and dangerous. But people are being robbed every day, even in the villages. Let's even forget Kampala. In the villages, people don't sleep. People are being robbed in their houses because the security system isn't working. And I'm now even wondering if the NRM ever had the capacity to deal with insecurity in this country. Because if you remember, there is a time when we had Wembley trying to control crime because the police has failed. Yes. Is it possible that our government has never had the ability to deal with crime, and this has just been PR, and it served us for a certain time, and now we are just opening our eyes?
But Dictor, how do you balance that with the fact that you were in Karamoja and you're able to drive to Karamoja any time of the day, which was the heart of insecurity years ago? That there are people. I was in Moroccan.
Heart of insecurity.
Of insecurity, yes.
That's not a fair description of Karamoja.
No, it was.
No, but
heart of insecurity.
Yes. That's different. Here's the thing, that this government has been able to fight wars. And the thing in Karamoja was fought like a war. I have previously interviewed a gentleman who was taken and beaten and like almost castrated for having a gun. And the thing is that the people of Karamoja who were, when they were taking away guns, they treated them like an opposite army, and therefore it was a civil war.
Same thing that was used when Operation Wembley. When Operation Wembley was announced in Kampala, they said, if you have a gun and we're trying to get a gun from you, we will deal with you like a military style. And even when you're arrested, if you're not taken out of action in the chest, that Operation Wembley was good at here, when it operated, they would run like it was Hollywood. Chasing after criminals and put them out. If they arrested you, then you'll be subjected to military court-martial. Yeah,
which just means they can fight a war, but they can't fight crime.
Charles, there's 2 ways of thinking about this spate of killings that's happening. We spoke about the people cashing in. In this history, we've had precedents where sitting governments themselves cause havoc to their communities as ways of offering the same. You cause havoc in this country, and then you offer security as you move towards the election, so you still thrive on offering security. So that's one way of thinking about it. The other one is that there's so many security wings that we have in this country nowadays. We have the junta, like you just mentioned something humorous. arrested the wrong people, and then you say, oh, you know what, we arrested the wrong people, so release them.
No, they say you guys arrested the wrong people.
Yeah.
And you saw something else in I think in Enanga's statement. There is a suspect who was taken out by the CMI. This one was killed by the CMI before they were prosecuted.
Exactly.
Yes.
So interesting is that you have there's so many security wings in this country, CMI, JIAT, ISO, GISO, all of them are doing the same job. And then the police and then the military, they're doing the same job.
And they want to,
but
to
to
look
do
to be
that,
the ones doing
there are
it.
budgets behind these security interventions, the budgets. You could see a contest for budgets. This country has really transformed in a way that money is everything now. So one of the ways to think about the security lapses we have, rather security challenges we're facing this country is the clamor for budgets is a big thing, that you end up arresting the wrong people because you know you want to be seen as doing the same. But here's the funny part, that it cannot be, what I've said cannot explain cases where members of the first family are being killed.
Let's
becomes really difficult.
Because some of the reasons that Kale Kaihura has been sanctioned is torture, abuse of human rights. And some of these have been most prominent. If you remember this, the chairperson of Kamwenge Town Council, yes, the Kamwenge Town Council, he was arrested over allegations that he was among the killers of Kawese. And now you saw the rearrest of some of the suspects who remain in jail today, just last week, and the sanctions that the US is placing on Kaihura. Let's discuss that after a very short commercial break. We'll be right back. You're still watching The Fourth Estate, and we're discussing insecurity in the country and the president's or government's response to it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, during the same week, Kale Kaihura gets sanctioned by the United States. He's given a very interesting response to the sanctions, but there are two strands to this discussion. One, in his defense, he says, wait a minute, stop this hypocrisy. We work together. I worked with the FBI.
I was even rewarded.
Yes, I was even recognized and given an award for the work I was doing on security in this country. That's one strand. But the United States accuses Kale Kaihura of presiding over human rights abuses, of corruption, and many other things. Some of this corruption, some of the human rights abuses relate to the torture suspects were subjected to. And we just talked about Biamkama, the local council 3 chairperson for Kamwenge Town Council, who was arrested from right here, Parliament Avenue, near Minister of Lands, over suspicion that he was involved in the murder of Kawese. That Kawese murder has not been resolved up to this day. What you see is the rearrest, a crude rearrest of suspects reminiscent of days before the NRM took power.
Yeah.
How does that get explained away? You talked about the letter. You write a letter. You call the press. No, you order all TVs to run a president's address to the nation. He calls a press conference, but actually lectures at the press conference because that was one of the most interesting. He was being interviewed, but he spoke for I think 1 hour before there was an intervention to respond to him.
Yeah.
Does this? How do you look for the answers? How do you find the answers that answer this insecurity and comforts the nation that government one is in charge, that the actions that are being taken are right? And then I talked about the second strand of the use intervention, the use sanctions against Kaihura. Why do a post-mortem? Why become an undertaker? The man is down and out, and you're coming in with sanctions. How do those help?
I mean, it makes so much sense when he's down and out, and I'm sure it's easier to sanction somebody who is down and out because he doesn't have any more influence. When you sanction him, if you're at the level of IGP, you're very influential in the country. You have so much safeguards, and the argument against your sanctions could be pitched at a high level. You almost attain diplomatic status that nothing can be done to you. So
no, but you send a message. The international community has done that in respect of Omar Bashir, former president of Sudan.
I wouldn't be comfortable discussing these two in the same strand because the circumstances are really different. But let me start perhaps with the argument that Fandi Kayihura said we were working together. So you can't turn around and say you are accusing me. Maybe you also accuse yourselves. One of the responses.
That's exactly what he says.
One of the responses that I found fascinating, responding to the sanctions from the public domain, is saying that the U.S. doesn't have the moral authority anymore to accuse anybody of abusing human rights because they are doing the same across the world. Which I find is a smart response, but it falls short.
You've seen the clip that's been circulating on social media of Paul Kagame and his interview with Channel 24.
Exactly. Yeah. He said you don't have the moral authority to keep on lecturing to the world about human rights and so on. What I find fascinating is that our history with America is a good history. America is an ally and a friend to Uganda. So America has contradictions with, say, Iran, the Middle East, and back home with the black Americans. Those are other histories. If you're speaking relations between America and Uganda, it's a good story. Now, when they start sanctioning Ugandans who have been in power, that makes so much sense to the Ugandan than their history. So when, if Kayihura responds by saying we've been working together, it's true to a point. But for the average Ugandan, is concerned about you. In fact, you actually admitting collusion with a foreign government to commit crimes against Ugandans. That in itself is dangerous. All right. Whether they colluded with you and now they're accusing you're turning and killing you with some things, it's not good defense. It doesn't like get you off the hook. But that runs through our security apparatus and what we've seen unfold in this country over a long period. We have a man who's been at the helm of our security, placing a general for over 10 years and is now being held accountable for the crimes he committed throughout his period. That speaks so much the security condition in this country. Besides the response we're going to give now and the ways in which America doesn't have the moral authority and the beautiful defense that Kayihura is going to give, it speaks to what we have in this country. The human rights abuses in this country are humongous, at humongous proportions. When Nalfenya was closed down, and I can tell you, funny part, the thing started way before. You were speaking earlier about how earlier governments, to keep in power, had to have the same facilities of torture and abuse of human rights. This government, when the Muslims were being tortured, safe houses happened way before when Muslims. My professor Bastion wrote a book about safe houses back in the day, together with Imam Kasu. There's a book on safe houses which are being brought out to the public domain. The media didn't pay so much attention then. Now we have safe houses all over this country, and we are now starting to pay attention. So as a way of governing, you're going to have safe houses, especially if you're running a banana republic and you want to stay in power for too long. You're going to have safe houses as a way of governing, and you're going to abuse human rights. So if you're looking at the entire narrative that our government has sold to us, when we came to power in 1986, we gave you security, we have respect for human rights, and this country is prospering, in the lens of human rights and security. If that's the narrative you sold to us as Ugandans for the last 30 years, it's starting to crumble.
Yes?
I don't know whether we should say it's starting to crumble. It's been maybe crumbling for some time now. I remember one of the things that was at the helm of bringing the 1995 constitution was to deal with the issue of detention without trial that was very common during the time of Obote, I think 1 and 2. And it's very interesting that the courts in Uganda abet detention without trial so much, because yes, there are instances where they have released suspects and then they've been taken by the security forces. But by the time they do that, they'll have sent these people back and forth over and over again, ignoring our history, which is that the state uses its institutions to harass people they want to harass, and somehow our courts encouraging this vice that we know has been a problem for us for a very long time. It's very interesting that they do that. On Kaihura, I was talking to Maria Barnett of former Human Rights Watch, and she was saying that there are so many. She was saying that there are so many other security officers in Uganda who deserve to be in the same space as Kaihura. And it's also interesting that
some are in worse spaces.
Yeah.
They're in jail and they never got out. For him, he got out.
No, but you see, the ones you're talking about are low-level criminals. If you're talking about a guy like Nixon, yes, those were Kaihura's boys.
But I mean, they're in jail for doing what Kaihura asked them to do, and Kaihura is out.
Yeah, but let's talk about our security people right now, whether it's Kaka or because the things they are doing now should place them the same place as Kaihura. If you need sanctions, have them sanctioned. It's interesting that they just pick a guy like Kaihura who is out of power, and it's, for me, it's sort of worrying, because either the ones who are there now will try as much as possible, will do whatever is necessary to stay close to power, because if they lose the power, then they'll end up where Kaihura is and they'll have no defense. The other possible outcome is that Museveni might decide, I need attention from the US, maybe they have not been paying attention to me, so let me give Kaihura a position, let me bring him back to government.
Charles, Kaihura could be out of power, but his significance to the security in this country is not all gone. He still remains a significant figure. Yeah. When you talk about the history of security and offering security to policing in Uganda, Kaihura's name will remain very strong.
Yeah, but you see, Yusuf, that's true. But you see, Kaihura got his power from Museveni. He didn't necessarily get it, amass it on his own. He got his power from Museveni, and the moment Museveni gives up on him, he might have people, he might still have people, but at the end of it all, he will definitely lose them.
But how do you tie this into the broader question we're discussing? We're discussing about 2-3 things. One is that the president sits and pens a letter to respond to a growing spate of insecurity. A lot of it started under the former Inspector General of Police, and also facilitated his exit from the position of IGP at the time he did. You haven't resolved a lot of those issues. Number two, Kaihura in his
you have resolved neither of them.
You've resolved none of them, yes. Kaihura in his response to the American says, look, we're working hand in glove on this. You're as guilty as I am if I am guilty. Why would the Americans be coming? Isn't it hypocritical, for example, as he said, that you're coming in so late? She's talking about current players in the security apparatus who are doing exactly the same things that Kaihura did. So why wait for these Ugandans you want to be defending by sanctioning Kaihura? Why come to complain after they have been tortured? And then the other thing is, yes, and I want to come to you, Agatha. The other thing is, you've built this country's apparatus, like we said. You've built this country and your reputation as the guarantor of security, as the guarantor of human rights, as a person or as a government different from previous governments. But in this same week, we're talking about members of parliament. Some people have said they were posturing to try and visit safe houses. And the security minister who has been putting his foot down and said, you will not be allowed in these safe houses. Basically admitting that you run safe houses. He admitted, yes, you have safe houses, but actually it's a wrong name. They're not safe houses. They're torture chambers.
They are death houses.
Spread across the country. You've seen people have been trying to locate some of them. Previously, we had seen one up in Kololo, next to a residence of a diplomat. Have you come round full circle, like people have said, to come back and realize, wait a minute, so it was necessary to have safe houses. So if we're condemning those previous governments for keeping torture chambers like Nile mansions, we're actually doing the same, because when it comes to sustaining power, you do everything you can to sustain your power.
I will start with Yusuf seemed to agree, say the same thing, that as a way of governing, you need to have safe houses. And maybe, so, yes.
Doesn't your condemnation fly out in the air, in the wind?
First rate chance. So maybe you do. Like we have seen them all over the place. I have read many books about Mossad and how they operated. We have seen Guantanamo Bay. The US has failed to close it. Maybe you need, for intelligence purposes, maybe you need safe houses. But in this country, we are saying that a police, security agencies that torture people in broad daylight when they're arresting them. Let's remember in 2011 how they arrested Besigye. Let's remember our fellow journalist recently. Let's remember all those people that we've seen them on camera torturing them while arresting them in broad daylight. You do not want to imagine what they do to them in safe houses. You don't want to give them that cover of it's necessary, we need safe houses. To put people in places that they are going to torture them and kill them. And Yusuf was talking about us having many security agencies that are doing the same thing. We know very well that many people were tortured, some killed, because of the fight between Tumwine and, the former Tumukunde and Kaihura. Both wanted to show the president that I am the one doing better. Both wanted to compete the other. And the biggest fight was over the budget. Tumukunde wondered why, as security minister, he doesn't control a big budget.
Would you take that back a little bit to Sejusa? As coordinator of intelligence agencies? Yes,
that Kaihura did. And they used to take wrong intel to President Museveni against each other. One of the, I interviewed about 3 victims of torture in Kenya when we were doing series about human rights abuses. And they were telling us how they would beat them up to say it is Tumukunde who ordered them to kill Kawesi, or the other way around. So you have a security that has that reputation, and you want to come and tell us that, like Tumwine arrogantly has been saying, that every government has safe houses, we have to have safe houses. We cannot sit and say that, knowing very well that
I have interviewed Tumwine before, and on this set, and I was asking him, when you were that vibrant young secondary school teacher, and there was that fire for liberation burning in you. I was interviewing him, I think, towards one of those NRM liberation days, the 20, not Aresita, the NRM day. 26th January. Yes, in the lead up to 26th January. And I said, when you were that person who felt so much was going wrong, now when you look back as a guy in charge, and this was before he was made Minister for Security, by the way, and he was defensive.
He was in charge as a historical.
Yes. Now, I wonder what he would say today, because
you haven't.
I have heard him say what he says, but he hasn't been confronted with his own history, the thing that forced him to go into the bush.
He sat on TV just on Thursday and said, he didn't wait for the interviewer to ask anything. Let me start by saying that this government, the NRM government, now I'm seated here, everyone is seated in their houses watching me peacefully. Their lives are not threatened. That never happened before. And
of course, he didn't talk about the people he had in those safe houses, did he?
Take me back to what you were saying about this government coming and saying we brought security and
peace.
I have had this conversation with so many people. I think Victor saw me talk about someone on Twitter who said we had hit rock bottom. He said, no, Uganda cannot go back to where it was. If you were here in the 1970s, in the 1980s, the streets in Kampala would be deserted. Yes, I wasn't here, but I have read, I know that people were killed. But if we started now counting charts from maybe 1996, the election of 1996, how many people were killed? In 2001.
In 2006.
In 2006. And we can count.
2009, 2011.
We can count those that have been killed by the state in their contest for power. We can now also count those that are dying because the state is failing to protect them.
And those who are dying because of...
The other day, Honorable Semuju was here on the spot, and he was with Shabana Wantariza, who said the same thing that Tumwine is saying, we brought peace. And Shabana Wantariza, Semuju said, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And Semuju he counted. You killed this one here. Remember the guy in Rwanda in 2016? Was it 2016 or 2011? Besigye's brother. He counted so many people, and I shared that clip with that person that has been saying, oh, we had hit rock bottom. I don't know what rock bottom looked like, that it isn't now.
And you know, the thing is that no one is safe. Last week I was somewhere on Kampala Road, and I met a young man who is terrified. So he works in an electronics shop. So he's in an electronics shop, and he meets someone who had come to buy a TV, The guy buys a TV and says, give me your number so that if I fail to set it up, I can call you and
You help me set it
help
up.
me set it up. So the person who bought the TV called the young man. The young man forgot, because I mean, if you're dealing with so many people in a day, he forgot about the guy. The next day, people call him. They're saying, do you know this person? He's like, no. We are looking for this person. He has a gun, blah, blah, blah. We know he called you. So as they talk, he realizes it's that gentleman who bought a TV for 1 million shillings. So he's like, no, this guy came in, we met here in the shop. I don't know him. The next thing, he sees they are following him. They're
follow trailing him.
Yeah, they're trailing him. And then they go to him and they ask for his national ID. They take a photocopy of the national ID. The next day, they tell him, you know, if you give us 2 million shillings, this thing will go away. Now, that's a random person who has, who has been nowhere near anything. But somehow,
Like a border guy takes you and then you say, give me your number just in case I need somebody to take me back.
yeah, so,
I'll call you.
and that's the weird thing, because the next thing you know, this young man will be, of course he cannot afford 2 million shillings if you're selling in an Indian shop. What are the likelihood that you can afford 2 million shillings? Very, very unlikely. The next thing you know, he'll be kidnapped. And
ends up in a safe house.
So it's
he will end up dead. We don't even know
how many people have been
safe
killed
houses.
as
So
a result.
let me put it this way. Yes, we might read from the Book of Lamentations a lot, but let me put it this way. As media, how do we raise these questions? How do we ask for these answers? I was happy that when the president called that press conference, so-called press conference, to address the media about insecurity around the time Kirumira was killed. It had been scheduled and then ran around the time Kirumira was killed. That I didn't go because I don't want to be in a place where you sit and you get a lecture instead of asking questions and getting answers. What I don't know is who is asking the questions, who is willing to give the answers. If you saw the answers that Tumwina was giving to Parliament and the answers he's given subsequent media engagements he has had, the rest of the security, you're talking about Shaban Vantariza, he's a retired army officer, but he's the deputy director at the Uganda Government Media Center. Who is going to give these answers? Who's going to ask these
Charles,
questions? Yes. Do Ugandans deserve these answers?
Charles, here is what I think media is missing. When the budget is passed, and security has the second highest budget in all the other sectors, we never follow the money. We need to follow the money. The idea of running safe houses runs on a budget. The idea of cooking up, you know, when Bessie used to write in this country, and he writes it almost all the time, I have it on good authority that most of these riots were staged by the police itself, so that you can justify a budget.
Staged?
So
they would tell Bessie to
No. They'll bring in young men to go.
So that to make it violent.
Disruption.
Charles, we need to follow the money. The story that he has just narrated is one of the testaments that you give when you want to argue for a budget. There are criminals doing A, B, C, D. We need a bigger budget. I think what media is failing Ugandans over is we're not following the money. Like, we're really failing for the money. If you have a budget as high as that, who gets what? Who took the contract for bringing CCTV cameras in this country? Who perhaps is bringing in helmets which have reflectors? We need to follow the money at every single point. I think that's a big thing. But I wanted to say something earlier on the torture chambers and the ways in which we think they're necessary for government.
The way they're being justified.
Yeah. So
by those who are doing them now, yet they condemned them previously.
Let me put a context to this.
Yes.
Torture chambers are necessary for governments in pursuit of absolute power. They're not modes of government. In pursuit of absolute power. If you talk about America running the Guantanamo Bay, America is in eternal pursuit of absolute power. If you talk about Israel doing the same, it's in pursuit of absolute power. Idi Amin had them in pursuit of absolute power. If you have them in this country, they are all necessary for those government in pursuit of absolute power. If you don't see a future where you'll be out of power and safely in your home, you pursue absolute power. That's where you find those facilities necessary. So they're not necessary in themselves as modes of government. They're necessary in perpetuation of absolute power. And I think that's lacking in the way we think about them as necessary for government. No. It's not that. If you're in pursuit of absolute power, you find them necessary. There's something that also you mentioned earlier, which I wanted to reflect on.
Sure.
Why a man who is down and out and I said Kayihura is really significant. If you are authoring Museveni's story, if you're trying to turn the tables on Museveni as America, who is a very important ally, you start by authoring this story in very interesting ways. You'll have to put Kayihura as a major character, as a chapter in the narrative, in the story of Museveni. You'll have to put Kasese, for example. Major Railway has been cited as one of those who are potentially going to be put on the ban, sanctioned. You'll have to have Kony. The story of Kony has been authored in a particular way. Olaro Tunu is in pursuit of the story of Kony, which shows that the government was actually accomplished. Father Rodrigo wrote a book, Tall Grass, before he ran out of this country, which was written in English. And after writing the book, coming on the market, he ran out of the country. The book actually argues the crimes that we saw in northern Uganda were perpetrated by the UPDF. Now, if you have, if you're America, and you now you have an ally who's become a liability, you start authoring their stories, and you have to place chapters in their right positions. You place Kayihura in a position, you have it as a chapter. You have Kasese as a chapter. You go to those landmark events of human rights abuse that need to be profiled, and then you can make the case against your ally who's become a liability.
We need to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be discussing a deal signed between President Yoweri Museveni and President Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya to bring peace to the conflicted areas, to Uganda's northeastern border. To the northeastern border, because the conflict is when Karamoja has been pacified, largely, Turkana on the other side of the border hasn't been pacified. So there's still infiltration of light arms coming from across the border and raids onto an armed Karamojong, taking away cattle. We'll be discussing that after a very short break. Welcome back to this last segment of the Fourth Estate, featuring a panel of journalists commenting about the major events that dominated news headlines during the week. We spent the first two segments talking about security and the response of various players to it, particularly President Yoweri Museveni and the American government sanctioning former Inspector General of Police Kale Kayihura. We'll now need to move on. During the week, on Friday, President Yoweri Museveni and his Kenyan counterpart Uhuru Kenyatta met in Moroto on Thursday. Yeah. Not on Friday, on Thursday. Yeah. In Moroto, and signed a peace deal towards the joint development of the marginalized Karamoja, Turkana, West Pokot region along the border of the two countries. Part of the deal involves disarming the Kenyan Pokot. We did talk about that briefly. Years after the Karamojong handed in their guns. The rest of the deal allows Ugandan sugarcane farmers to export to Kenya. That was is that part of the discussion?
No, that was an
earlier decision. Okay.
I think in Japan.
Yes, you were in Moroto for the signing of this MOU, and the UNDP was putting these things together
it's really a UNDP. It's a UN project, really.
Yes.
Not just UNDP.
What is in this project?
Well, the promise is they are going to invest in different things, different arms of the UN, or whether it's UNICEF, it will take the projects under UNICEF, FAO will take the projects under FAO. So one of the major, the feeling I got was that Kenya was pushing for this memorandum of understanding because Uganda has increasingly been becoming disillusioned with Turkana's failure to deal with, Turkana and West Pokot's failure to deal with the guns. So I was talking to one of the MPs from Uganda, and he told me that there are so many people who are being killed by the Turkana
by the Pokot.
No, Turkana in the Kotudo area, because the Pokot would come from Amdat, and they were saying it's very hard to keep welcoming these people to use our water. Kobebe Dam, if you saw the picture where the two presidents were standing.
The one behind us.
Yes. and they were saying it's very hard to accept these people into our communities when they are consistently killing our people. So part of the problem, it seems, has been that the politicians in Uganda have been talking to the president to like block the border, and then Kenya was having a problem, and according to Wamarwa, Kenya's Minister for Devolution, he was saying then President Kenyatta, when they were in Japan, when they were in Mombasa in May, he pushed for that MOU so that Kenya doesn't have to come to negotiate all the time, to negotiate with Uganda to
when it's dry on the other side and they want to cross over to look for water.
So that's one of the things. But for the UN thinks they can then create. They are trying to work on all of those borders: Uganda with South Sudan, Kenya with South Sudan, with Ethiopia, to do projects that can then, because those are some of the poorest areas in this region, so they are trying to.
So what's the development component about this? Because the security component is well understood. Ugandans disarmed. Ugandans disarmed.
Yes.
Kenyans did not disarm.
Yeah.
And Ugandans were saying, how do you confront an armed guy who comes with their cattle from across the border, or comes to ride cattle from across from the Ugandan side of the border to take it across Kenya when they are armed and we don't have guns? There was a time when the Karamojong asked that they should be rearmed so that they can deal with the situation, though government insisted. You were disarmed, we're not going to rearm you, but the UPDF will provide security. The thing is, how do you stand and block people who are desperately looking for water if they're coming over because it's dry on their side of the border? So what's the development component?
Yeah, the thing that I think I've noticed that is changing within Uganda's foreign relations with its East African borders. Uganda has generally, East African neighbors, has generally been lenient with East African neighbors, whether it's allowing people in, whether it's instituting non-tariff barriers to, let's say, Tanzania or Kenya. They generally don't do that unless it's one that has been long-standing. But I think that's changing. Someone was telling me that these days they talk about doing the same things the other countries are doing to get some results. And I think that's what Kenya foresaw and is trying to deal with. On the UN, one of the things that I think was promised is a road that would connect Turkana, Lodwar, which is the main city of Turkana, to Karamoja, which would be a good thing, because you have to remember Lodwar is the center for oil in Kenya, and since they've just shipped out, then you know that if the two are connected, the road is quite bad. It's very, in Uganda it's steep and hilly and rough because there are rocks. On the Kenya side, it's sandy and it's very difficult to drive sand. So one of the things that the UN has promised is a road, and the UN has tried this before at the Kenya-Ethiopia border where they connected Moyale. So it's the same concept. So I expect that's what will be happening even with Karamoja, and the president seemed to hint on it as well. Yeah.
Agatha, two things. One is that Karamoja, for once, maybe climate change advocates will be interested in this. It's been experiencing good rain since April. For the last about 4 months, they've experienced very good rains, and they're looking towards a bumper harvest, especially of sorghum. I saw a lot of sorghum when I was moving there yesterday and the other day. A lot of sorghum. They have a lot of sunflower and some maize, and that is in the Moroto area, which is drier than the other parts of Karamoja. You can't underrate the benefits of the development dividend coming out of security. The development dividend coming out of more security. And the government of Uganda has invested quite significantly in opening up Karamoja and creating those roads that access that area. You can just imagine what will happen if there is more opening and some piece of security on the other side of the border. What I don't know is whether President Kenyatta has made a commitment to disarm the Pokot as part of this MOU.
No, he didn't. That's where his comment on marrying Karamojong, beautiful Karamojong women came in. He was saying, you should come and get married here so that we see how you can attack each other when you're now relatives. And Wamara made a similar comment also about having relatives and saying, you know, if you destabilize these people, you'll have to deal with it. We won't have to deal with it from Nairobi. So I don't think Kenya has committed.
So Kenya is basically still looking at Turkana, West Pokot as a far-flung of area that doesn't influence politics in Nairobi.
Yeah, which still makes it difficult for the Ugandan side to do anything about that region and the issues it has been grappling with. And if it weren't for the UN being involved, I would take that as another MOU that we sign MOUs all the time, but nothing happens. But then what's strange is that this time it's Kenya that we are more skeptical about implementing than Uganda. Normally they say Uganda makes the laws, good laws, and Kenya implements, because we don't know how to implement anything. So we hope that Kenya, having a good reputation with implementing things, will implement this one, because like you said, you cannot disarm this side and leave the other side armed and you think you're going to achieve peace. Yeah, so I think if they take it seriously, and Kenya, I don't know why Museveni, for example, didn't raise it about disarming the other side of the border. But
I think they've been discussing this at various levels for a long time.
Yeah.
But the
so what reasons does Kenya give for not disarming?
From my previous interviews, Kenya doesn't, because like I said, in Uganda, they sort of fought a war with the Karamojong to be able to disarm.
And that was way back in 2001?
Yes. Yeah, so the problem, I think, for Kenya is that they are struggling. They are unable to do that.
That's what Malwa and our Minister John Byabagamba, yes, who's the Minister for Karamoja.
And I think Kenya has been struggling. I'm not sure they are able to pull off something like that, where you fight a war with the natives to get
Kenya has suffered a commitment problem on dealing with the Turkana question. Because it's a huge question. For a long time, they have failed to deal with it. You saw the issues that came with Uganda fighting its own people to get guns from them. And I think Nairobi has been reluctant to go that way, or to commit the resources and the resolve that is necessary. Yes. Yeah. They are not forceful at all.
They are less forceful than our government. Our government would achieve if it
no, but you see,
because there was a lot of torture, a lot of raids on communities for Uganda to get those guns.
But you see, somehow, Yusuf, you find that government has some justification. If you see what's happening in that area now, you think maybe it was a necessary evil. And even the Karamojong themselves will tell you. People were telling me yesterday how you'd be walking on the street, on the hotel where I stayed, and then someone would come and they're just excited, they begin shooting. Or maybe they have seen a nice bull, and to celebrate that bull, they fire in the air. Whoever that bullet gets or not. But now you can be in Moroto and it's peaceful, and you can go off on off-roads.
Yeah,
and
you can
be
go inside
and you can be guaranteed of safety. And I think this dividend is beginning to pay off, and I think long term it will pay off more.
I'm skeptical about whatever you guys have said. A friend of mine wrote a PhD on Karamoja, the region, and focused on this political economy, mostly the mineral resources in the region. It's one of the richest regions, in richest parts of the of this region that have enormous mineral deposits. And I think we miss the story when we don't follow those minerals. Because one of the questions we're asking, whose development? The questions you asked were legitimate. If you successfully disarmed on the Ugandan side, why are you unable to successfully disarm on the other? That's a legitimate question. But failure to have this as one of the big questions, because disarmament is often a project of international organizations, right? Like, it's not often funded by our governments. International agencies come in and pursue small weapons across the region and have this community.
It failed to work.
Now, if we are claiming successfully that we have disarmed our region, then we need to claim the same thing about the other side. It's not innocent for Kenya to be reluctant and disarming the Turkana on the other side. I want to follow the money. It's not innocent. I want to follow the money. For those who have done ethnographic work in Karamoja, have told us that our governments are moving Karamojangs from places that are rich in minerals and herding them into zones where they can do their work without interfering with the mining which is going on. And one of the things that we haven't followed so successfully as media is the stories of mining. We often look at the small artisanal miners across in Mubende, in Karamoja, in these other places, but we never follow the big players in the mining industry. This is big. in Karamoja. Gold is a big thing in Karamoja, and there's a lot of money in it.
Yeah, they are
So
about to
land is being cleared for miners. The development we're seeing when say, oh, these Karamoja, they used to shoot in the air. I mean, we portray them as lunatics who are so obsessed with shooting. But now they're being herded in two small places, and land is being cleared for big miners. And I think this story we need to follow. The disarmament wasn't necessarily for peace and security, but also to create space for miners, right? And we follow this really closely because it's big.
You know, something I was told, sorry to cut you through, we're having a discussion with journalists in the region about exactly what you're talking about. And they're talking about mines in Karamoja where even the district chairperson was denied access. Like you can't access it because it is protected by armed people.
And interest in Karamoja in the region for its minerals dates back even the colonial period. I mean, there are books in 1907, 1920s, showing that these places are so potential. They have enormous mineral potential that is a thing that we need to have interest in. But we have a problem with the ways in which we exploit our resources.
No, it is, I agree with you. We have read about these things through these ACME trainings, where while we are focusing on oil, which is 1.6 billion barrels, 1.7, the potential of minerals in this country, the minerals called rare earths that are worth much more alone, much more than oil is, phosphates, so many. And there are so many companies that have licenses to mine. And those companies are just briefcase companies, but most of them are for Kabagambe Kalisa, the former PS in Energy, Salim Sadi is involved.
No, you need to be careful. We're on air to,
no, but
to put names to people we can't.
Yes.
If you have documents,
also,
why not?
why I agree with Yusuf is that we might want to look at that, because at first I asked, isn't it strange that Kenya has failed to implement where Uganda has? Like, so it's selfish interests that, first of all, you have people that want minerals there. Secondly, we have the First Lady who was the minister of that region for a long time, and maybe for her she has access to resources.
Here's my thing though. We know that the Karamojong are being herded out of places. That's true, and even for when they are convinced to do agriculture, or to grow crops instead of keep animals and so on and so forth. It's so that they can herd them into specific places where they can stay there. But you also have to understand that this government is the way it is. It will do these things against its people. But what else can be done to make sure that the people are at least seeing an improvement in livelihood? And I think that's also important to reflect upon.
But here's the thing: sedentarizing the Karamojong is not necessarily for their benefit.
Yeah,
it's not wrong.
It's actually wrong, because here's the thing: the climate change is such that pastoralism is a more resilient form of livelihood than sedentary. Because if you're in Karamoja, you know it will rain this time around, but next year it won't. So if you can equip them to have water, big dams like the ones, pastoralism becomes a more competitive way of living than growing crops.
Crop agriculture.
Yeah, than crop agriculture. So that's true. But if, and when the president was speaking, he was talking about some things which in my view were wild, because he was talking about growing olives, growing dates, growing things, making sure each Karamojong had a dam so that they can keep Frisian cattle. And I was thinking, who is the advisor of this man? This cannot work here. But we also have to accept that certain things, if you have a road, for example, connecting Karamoja to Rodwa, maybe you can have a cattle. You can then have an abattoir where you supply meat to the oil-producing region in Turkana. So there are opportunities. We know that the government is doing certain things, but there are opportunities that can be taken from that.
That's the bigger question, really. Yes, the skepticism is on one side. The exploitation and the taking advantage of communities in Karamoja is a debate that's ongoing. The discussion we're having was actually on extractives with journalists, and how do they cover the extractives in Karamoja, in an area as sensitive as Karamoja. For a long time, Karamoja was forgotten. Now
it's not forgotten.
Yes, no. For a long time, it was almost, in terms of development, it was written off. Now you have development going there, and the question you're asking, which is a legitimate question, is whose development?
Yeah.
So you have a nice shiny road. Yes,
this?
you have a nice shiny road that goes into Karamoja.
But maybe
it opens it up.
maybe it shouldn't matter in whose
Yes.
interest. It
No, no,
should
no,
matter that they are there. The
It opens up this
infrastructure is
area.
there.
But where do you place the community? That's a legitimate question. But also, when there was insecurity in Karamoja, who did it affect most? Did it affect the people going to exploit it now, or it affected the people of Karamoja? So if there is security, there is a benefit to the Karamojong.
Yes.
Where do you place some of those things?
So first, I want to disagree when you say it was forgotten. It wasn't really forgotten. And you know, the best in the development discourse is like development comes to a particular place and then people, all of a sudden their lives are transformed. You sedentarize them, you bring urbanization, you bring running water, and all of a sudden their lives become better. I don't know how long, media also failed us that we didn't have a track record. We didn't have like how much success when the first ministry was opened, the Ministry of Karamoja. It was opened, the first time we had a ministry.
Specifically focusing on Karamoja.
Focusing on Karamoja, we didn't have a track record on how much success was achieved.
No, but
in
that's
certain
available
objectives.
if you look at the poverty numbers, and it's not
Yeah.
much.
No, but I'm very uncomfortable with poverty numbers. I want like grounded journalism to go and spend time there and live with the communities and see what the communities are going through.
But those also are available.
That
Not long ago, I
information
did
is
like
available.
three.
And
I did like three pieces, one in the Daily Monitor, actually three in the East African, where some of these things are discussed. Okay,
But-
not all,
No,
but
but Yusuf, you say one of the things is how do you transform a community? If more Karamojong are able to come and get a better education, if like there's been a struggle to win them off or to model lower education to the lifestyle to deliver it to them, then incrementally you have some progress.
if they are eating
Now,
2 meals instead of the one
Yes,
that they are
if
traditionally used to.
yeah, those might be small things. They might not benefit the larger section of the community, but they're important to that community. Would we be able, especially as media, to draw a line and say, this, we're covering the exploitation, the taking out of their minerals by other people, and they then track how that benefits the community and put pressure on that without...
So there's something called responsible capitalism.
Yes.
That you steal as you give back. So we this is what we're seeing happen, that you know you're building a school, you're building a small hospital, and it's praised. Media says the thing, they praise them, but the larger thing is
We are
you
promoting
are
responsible capitalism.
so we're promoting responsible capitalism. You create avenues for big
Better
miners.
than irresponsible capitalism. It takes out. It's been irresponsible capitalism has ruled the DR Congo for many years.
Exactly. So
Yes.
so what we're doing now, you build a road, media will fall for it. There's a road. You build a hospital. Media will fall for it. You don't know how long the road is going to stay, but what you're doing is that people have blocks,
You are plundering.
mining blocks
Yes.
in Karamoja.
You're
We're not
plundering,
following this one.
yeah.
You just told us they're mining mines where even local council
leaders
chiefs
can't
are not
access.
allowed to
Yes.
access them.
Yes.
Now that is very central. So you have to first take away the arms from the Karamojangs,
Yeah.
and you have monopoly over the arms, so that you easily protect those
Yes, but
spaces.
I don't know. It's a difficult one to deal with. Across the border in the DR Congo, which is deeply endowed,
Yeah.
you do not build the roads. You build airstrips.
Airstrips.
Yeah.
You land in,
Exactly.
pick what you want,
Yeah.
fly out.
But also you have mercenaries.
It makes a
You have
difference.
mercenaries.
It makes a
totally
difference.
You have
Yes.
you have mercenaries.
It's
You have the
another one
RPF,
telling
you have
Victor
RPF
that
and
maybe we
UPDF
shouldn't care
as
about
mercenaries
whose
taking
interests
care of
is
your
it.
interests.
No, because
No, but
you see, Yusuf, one of the things that talking to Karamoja over a few years, the Karamojong, here's what I learned. Here's what some of the things I've learned. There is the angle you're talking about where you cannot be allowed anywhere near a mine, and if you, by accident you pass, you are not allowed to even take a picture. But there is also the dimension of you meet a woman who is able to work, get 5,000 a day, go and feed his children, and in the words of one woman, be able to keep a husband, because in Karamoja, that was a Nick woman. She said, if you cannot feed the husband will go to the more hardworking wife, and that kind of takes something from the woman, feels like she's less of a woman or something. So there are so many dimensions. You also have the Karamojong able to live, instead of doing that manyata where you have very big ones because you have to protect yourselves in numbers, you have people able to be mobile, and if you have a business to transact, you're able to transact that business. So it's true, there is the plundering, but there is also some bit of improvement in people's lives. The other day we were talking about someone was talking about how these days you won't be killed for food the way the Karamojong used to do. He was like, if you have a laptop, no one cares, but if they see you with a soda, they'll kill you just to get to that soda. So there is some improvement.
Yes, and then maybe something else, Yusuf, before you come in there. You see, you might have read that report that was done by Angelo. For an organization in Karamoja, and I think last year when I spoke to the minister for Karamoja, Engineer Byawagambe, he said one of the biggest headaches that government is trying to deal with, at least at the governmental level, if you follow through the policies and what they're trying to do at that surface level, is one of the biggest challenges is a very high rate of alcoholism among the Karamojong,
which is a sign of poverty.
Which is evidence of poverty and hopelessness, that people have lost hope. When you have some of these interventions, yes, there is the plundering on one side, but there is also opportunity.
Is that a sign of poverty or a cause of poverty?
It's both.
It's also a sign.
It's a sign of poverty, but it's
some
also a cause of poverty.
In some desperate situations,
And
like
but
Karamoja,
more a sign of despair and hopelessness, which perpetuates poverty.
Yes.
Yes. But you now you ask, for those people in Karamoja, in Moroto, because they will gather, they're gathered in hotels and in halls, video halls now, watching this show. How do they take advantage? How do they advocate for their spaces, for their leaders? Some of them are here in Kampala, who are now at least able to go back and forth within the communities. For other actors like civil society and others, how do they position themselves? And for the journalists like the ones we're meeting, how do they position themselves to be able to secure the interests of the community without losing out? Taking advantage of this of these developments, both the MOU and the infrastructure that's being developed around it.
I'm fascinated by the big picture. I'm like individuals within Karamoja, the elite, the MPs. There's a part they can play in advocating better opportunities available to the everyday person. But we're forgetting to see the superstructure, if we could call it that. The idea that you create these little opportunities that people can jump on and make benefit in their lives. But at the same time, you're mostly interested, because how else can you develop these people? The state has to find a way of make sure that the minerals in an area which is rich in minerals are exploited so transparently that there are returns, that maybe percentages. Like say we have miners, state-sanctioned miners, A, B, C, D, who are mining, and this percentage will return to the communities. There you will see radical changes in these communities. Like I can tell you the advocacy of you as an individual, advocating against a state machinery which is less interested, which is more interested in giving you back the crumbs and taking the big thing, is really difficult, because capital.
Yes, I was told that one of the big miners who are mining marbles from there, their contract was, I think, they had gotten the contract wrongly, and it was terminated. So there hasn't been activity, but no one is looking at who has a license over what.
The way we are squeezing the oil companies in Hoima to make sure that these things, we have completely ignored the big miners in Karamoja, because for the Karamojans to benefit, the individual players, the MPs, the local, because those are you can easily buy them off. You have to have a program that is more grounded to ensure that the Karamojans benefit. That has to be radical.
And my question, let me come back to you, Victor.
I'm not sure that the MPs have that much power. This is something I noticed when Nanok of Turkana came. Like, you could see Karamoja MPs were more excited to talk to Nanok than they were talking to the central government officials, because Turkana has a very big budget. Nanok told me that they have about 400 million Kenya shillings that they have invested in trying to improve the peace situation so that the Turkana can be able to access Uganda. And 90% of that money has gone to the Uganda side because they are the receiving area, which means the MPs are getting more from Kenyan officials
Than they're getting
from
the central government.
So I'm not sure they even have that much power.
Interesting, and I would have been interested to know from you how this the MOU addresses some of the questions that
Yusuf is raising. So there are promises, and the thing for me, the reason I've not focused on those promises so much and the issue that he's raising is that we live in a country where the government is not really accountable to anyone. So you have to accept that and then pick on the things that you are able to access.
Okay.
For me, that's my view in this area.
And gentlemen, time is out. We need to get out of here. Congratulations to Chirabo Namutebi, who won 2 gold medals in swimming for the country. And we haven't had the opportunity, or maybe if you guys are interested, you can comment briefly on the Robert Mugabe funeral. You've seen whatever has been circulating on social media on the grandiose...
The casket?
No, the grand final resting places of Africa's big men. And
well, no, I'd rather go a bit back to the issue that we talked about, security and the judiciary, the judiciary's role in how they have contributed to our ending up where we are. Because every time the judiciary has had an opportunity to rein in this government where it's clear they are making a mistake, the judiciary has held back, and whether it's with the removal of age limit, whether it's the way they've handled the presidential elections, where they say, yes, there was rigging, but it wasn't substantial. When they're asked to define substantial, Katulebe once said, that's not my role, it's the role of parliament. But then, as far as we know, the judiciary is supposed to define these things where they have failed to be defined. And that's the problem. That
they should send it to the Constitutional Court.
Yeah, but you see, the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court is the upper constitutional court,
yes,
so to speak. So
no, I mean for him to say that they should send it to Parliament. Yet there's the
but I think she's raising a very valid concern, and we're picking this from the discussion we had earlier, that rearrest and how the judiciary has responded by writing a letter and condemning. Yes, conclude your thought. They
just keep they sort of, you feel like they are pretending, they are going through the motions of improving governance in Uganda, but they seem uninterested.
This incremental effect, Agatha, and I know you're keen to discuss this. When there was a raid on the High Court, that's
2005.
That's 2005, November 2005, to rearrest people. The judiciary, one went on called a strike, both of judges and of lawyers, and the former principal judge wrote a poem about the rape of the temple. But these things are incremental. Like Dicta says, you trace them back. If in 2001 you found problems with the election, yes, you found issues with that election, it graduates in November. I mean, the political issues and how you're dealing with them graduate with a raid on the High Court in November 2005. You come through the motions, like Dicta is saying, up to this day. Could they have, are they being complicit in in the situation they might find themselves also? In a very
from pig to man,
yes,
from man to pig.
I might start a little far from that, but arrive at it. We were talking about where our saviors, this government, got us from, and where we are now. And one of the... Our
liberators.
And one of the problems, the major problems of that time were apparently detention without trial. And...
if studio could change that picture and put on that picture of the arrest, if you have it, put that picture of the rearrest of those men, that video that was circulating.
And we thought the 1995 constitution had come to cure that. So you have a constitution that lays out what should be followed. You have a doctrine of separation of powers where all the three arms of government are supposed to be independent and equal. But the judiciary, I want to first talk about their being sinned against than sinning that Dicta concentrated on. It has for long been the weaker sibling. It has less power in appropriating its budget. It has less power in appointments. It has less power in each and everything. So because this person appoints you and sometimes they can decide to appoint you not on merit, not sometimes. I have heard a story of how Museveni was taken a list of judges in accordance to how they had performed, because they mark them, and he chose from the bottom.
But Agatha, the Supreme Court doesn't have that problem.
Why are you saying those I'm talking about were at the Supreme Court? Those judges.
Yes, but you see, once you have arrived, once you have been appointed, you secure that space. Yes, I know.
But you see, you were appointed not because you were the most qualified, but because maybe you've been you have compromised. No. Let me finish, Charles.
Yes,
I want to
please
finish.
do.
And I want to talk about the importance of the rule of law. That we have, Professor Dicey talked about the rule of law, and in essence he was saying it is good for everyone, whether those in power or out of power. Instead of me being subjected to the whims and emotions of man, I should be subjected to a law that is there that we all know. And we have people that have already suffered those consequences in this very government when they were in. We have Tinyefuza, we have Amama Mbabazi. When they were in, they thought they were invisible, but they were out. Even they are out now. Even these officials now, or the president or whoever, they will be out. For Museveni to come and condone the raid on the court premises by saying the civilian courts are letting us down, we are not going to allow their nonsense. The right to apply for bail is a constitutional right, and for very many reasons, that these people have not yet been proven guilty. Let them be out so that when they are not guilty in the end. So while I might agree that the judiciary has contributed to that by not putting their foot down, I heard that the launch of Professor Loka Onyango's book, the Chief Justice saying, people were saying they should lynch us, we should have annulled the election, but then annul the election, then what? Annulling the election is not in itself an end, because you're going to annul the election, and within 30 days, how many days are they? It's going to be conducted by the same electoral commission that you are saying doesn't meet the standards. And I was seated next to another professor who said, what is he talking about? Was that his job? Was that his job to know how you should have played your part, and history would have exonerated you that you did that. So I think they take a blame, but also we should really fight to protect its independence.
Thank you. Yusuf, I know you also wanted to comment on that particular issue, but
I'm fascinated when you mentioned you spoke about Mugabe. I mean, I've argued many times that if Mugabe had lost the anti-colonial struggle, he would be a world darling. Now that he's a winner, unlike Mandela, who failed, Mugabe is going to be a villain. But later, as we return to the ways in which we write our history, maybe we'll find space to accommodate Robert Mugabe as a winner and as a hero of the African continent. Now, quickly, to return to the rearrest at court, you know, like some of the letters came up, like the spokesperson of the police issued a statement. He said they have a right to go wherever they want, as long as there are criminal elements. All right, and I've argued for that. We have an autocracy of experts, right, as opposed to the autocracy that we had before, where you would govern through the constitution is null and void. You don't govern by you govern by decree. Now we have an autocracy of experts. Experts enable these bodies of government to be operational. You have a parliament which is big and noisy. You have a judiciary which actually often gives favorable verdicts to the rest of the community. But it's of experts in the sense that whenever they want to pursue a thing of their own, it will actually go through, but the body will remain intact. So if we're in the terrain of this autocracy of experts, you like to see the things happen. And this is not the end, it's just the beginning.
Thank you.
And what I'm going to say, let me finish with this one. Yes. We will not be shocked in the time to come if security are actually shooting people inside court.
Thank you. Our time is out. Yes, you end up going back to this. Kayihura was one of the biggest
I forgot that one.
Yes, he really condemned the 48-hour rule.
Exactly.
And then when it caught up with him, it's what people were trying to fall back on. And of course, the enforcers are the officers we're talking about who were under him, who were the enforcers of this rearrest then. Now they would love to benefit from the constitutional provisions. Our time is out. Thank you very much, Yusuf Seronkuma. Thank you very much, Agatha Teide. Thank you very much, Dictor Asimwe, for making time for the show. Thank you very much to all our viewers for joining us tonight, and always staying up late to receive this show. Thank you very much to the production crew that stay up late to deliver the show to you. Apologies, we're not still able to take your messages, but please follow this discussion and make the comments on our social media platforms. We'll pick them up and be able to use them as and when we're able to. From me, it's a good night.